Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Friday, October the 3rd, which makes this the news and events for Thursday, October 2nd, 2025, day 1317 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, and this is the Live at 5 from Kyiv, coming to you from this major European capital that is currently under error alert. Hey, Nana Pam, how you been? Hey, Guard, good evening. Evening, Derek Sands. Derek has been the first one in all week. Hey, Carl. Are you just sitting there by the TikTok waiting, Derek, or what? Hey, Clay. Hey, and Neil Steven. I do want to thank Derek Sands. Derek Sands. Oh gosh, there were so many people. Avi, Arna, Ted Greenow, without whose extraordinary support the whole Bulgaria trip would not have been possible. So I'm very grateful to all you folks. And then there were a ton of other people too that contributed. So big thanks, everybody. Tonight, Avi is the sponsor of tonight's live. So if we see Avi come in, let's thank him, please. Hey, Debbie. Hey, Feisty. Hey, Bjorn. Raven. Sweden is in the house. Good evening, Talanto. That's a new name for me. Hey, Nicola Jones. How's everybody doing? Hey, Laddie. Liam. Mark, the boss. How's everybody tonight? Boy, this shirt's a little light, huh? It's not great with the chat. I should make a point of not wearing this in the future. Hey, Dust Bunny. How's everybody doing tonight? Well, thank you, Bernard. I'm much better rested. Hey, Uncle Christopher. Yeah, and I kind of blend into the wall, don't I, pal? Okay, I will make a point of not wearing this shirt in the future. Good to know, Neil. I'm glad you're doing okay with that. Hey, Pedro. Hey, Seawolf. There's Avi. There's the sponsor of tonight's live. Guys, I'll tell you, I have no sponsors next week. I do have the rent money, thank God. But when I pay it tomorrow, I'm going to be broke as fuck. I mean, literally, like I won't have grocery money for the weekend. So if anybody can sponsor a live next week, the PayPal is in the description. That would be great. Thank you very much. I sure would appreciate it. Because I am a little bit concerned about getting through the weekend right now. Well, I can always make pancakes. I have some flour in there. I don't have any idea what you're talking about, Raven. I don't know what that is. Asking a question, what about the flying ones? I don't know what you're talking about. Hey, Van. Guys, there's like, 100 people in the chat. You can't just, you got to give me some context. Hey, Jeff. Subbase in Crimea. Okay, there's a subbase in Crimea. What about it? There's no context there. I have no idea what you're talking about. I mean, look, the Russians moved 4 submarines into the Black Sea before the beginning of the war, right? One of them has been destroyed. The other 3 are still there. They can't get any more in because of the Montreux Convention. So if they reopen a sub base in the Black Sea or whatever, or in Crimea, I mean, all that they can do is put 3 subs in there, the 3 that are there now. And putting any sub in Crimea is going to make it a target. So that seems like a non-starter right there. I mean, I don't know the details of this thing. I've never heard of Base 83 or whatever you said. But to me at this point, those kinds of small tactical, logistical maneuvers on the ground are irrelevant. They're irrelevant. Russia's logistics infrastructure is being pounded. Russia's energy infrastructure is being pounded. You cannot fight a war if you can't get ammunition to the front. You cannot fight a war if you can't get drones to the front or to their launching sites. We just saw last night video released by the Atesh Group. They did significant damage to the railroad infrastructure in Yalabuga out in Tatarstan, right? Now, why does that ring a bell for everybody? Why is it important that the supply trains out of Yalabuga aren't running right now? What's in Yalabuga, the Yalabuga economic zone in Tatarstan, of course, is where the Russians make their version of the Shaheds, the Garon 1s and the Garon 2s. How do those drones get to the front? They get there via railway. And the fact that the railway infrastructure has come under attack by the Atesh partisans out in Yalabuga and the trains are delayed means that we should have an easier time of it the next few days, right? There should just be fewer drones coming at Ukraine. Hey, Chef Deb. Hey, Parda. All right, so let's get to it then, guys. On the subject of fewer drones coming at Ukraine, you will notice that since the big strike on Saturday, the 600 drones, Russia has barely been able to field 50 drones a night. Now, last night it was a little bit bigger. 86 drones came in, of which 53 were shot down. That's a 62% interception rate. Now, the ISW has published its recap of the September actions on the ground in Ukraine. And according to the ISW, in September, Russia took less ground than it has in any other recent month. Just 100 square miles, or about 3 square miles a day. That's what all of Russia's grinding offensives are. All of Russia's forward movement. It totals a sliver, a teeny tiny, win a little sliver of Ukraine. In the last year, Russia has barely been able to grab 0.6% of Ukraine. At this rate, it will take the Russians 30 million men and 100 years to take Ukraine. Russia has already lost, and they're starting to admit it. Increasingly in the Russian papers, increasingly among the Russian ultranationalist community, particularly the voice of Igor Strelkov is being heard once again in the halls of the Kremlin. Strelkov, or Igor Girkin, who was behind the Donbass war, make no mistake, has said that Russia cannot win this war, that Russia has already lost. Thanks, Norbert. Increasingly, the average Russian is aware of how this war is affecting them. At the, what are they called? What's the name of that company? Avtovaz makes cars. They're a Russian car maker, right? And according to the Russian press today, they have tried to cut the salaries. So one thing that they've done is they've cut back to a 4-day work week. No pay, right, for that 5th day that you're lost. Now they've gone in and they've told everybody that they have to take a pay cut from about $1,300 a month to $600 a month. Cut their pay by more than half. They are begging the Russian government for a bailout that is not coming. Now, this automaker, Avtovaz, when they announced the pay cuts, saw mass resignations. So they're not going to have to lay people off because people quit. They are out of there. And that kind of thing is happening increasingly across the Russian industry, as businesses are going bankrupt. And we expect to see the largest bankrupts or the largest failures of banks in Russian history soon, right? Like this day is coming. Right now, the Russian government is forcing the banks to purchase worthless Russian bonds and securities, worthless pieces of paper. And those pieces of paper is what the Russian banks are going to be left with. Russia is imploding, Raven. Yes, exactly. That's what's happening. Now, there's a couple big pieces of news today. One is the ongoing story of what's happening at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant that we want to keep in the news, because I notice it's not, or lots of people are telling me that it is not being reported in the Western media. And this is a story that will directly impact all of us should it go sideways. And right now, it's increasingly likely that it is going to go sideways because the clock is ticking on this thing. We are now entering the 9th day where the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant has been disconnected from external power supply. That means that they're running on the diesel generators. Zelensky told us yesterday that one of those generators has already failed. We know that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, recommends that diesel backups for emergency use should never run longer than 72 hours because they are not reliable. They're not reliable. And we've already seen one of the diesel generators go down. Now, if these guys run out of fuel, and that's a very real concern, because in the last 60 days, we have seen the Ukrainians strike massive refinery capabilities to the tune now, according to RBC Russia, which is a Russian business outlet, 38%. So this is according to the Russians. 38% of refining capacity inside Russia is offline. 38%. 2 out of 5 gallons of gas are not being made. 2 out of 5 gallons of diesel aren't being made. This is a problem. And then, of course, you have the reality that the Ukrainians have been striking fuel trains, fuel pumping stations, and logistics. So getting the diesel to the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant so they can keep the goddamn generators running is a problem in and of itself. Now, as far as the diesel goes, we heard yesterday from the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency that they believed the Russians had 10 days left of diesel. That means that today they have 9 days left. What happens if the Russians continue to refuse to let the Ukrainians repair the power lines that were knocked out by Russian shelling? And I will say, okay, just to be clear, just to present both sides of this, as if there were two sides, the Russians are blaming the Ukrainians for it, okay? The Russians are blaming the Ukrainians, saying that it was Ukrainian shelling that knocked out the power lines to Zaporizhia. Well, that is quite a coincidence, given the fact that Russian shelling also yesterday took out the power lines to Chernobyl. Don't tell me that it's the Ukrainians. Don't tell me that it's Ukrainian sabotage inside Ukraine. This is bullshit. The Russians are knocking these power lines out on purpose, trying to threaten the world with nuclear disaster. And it's working. It's working. Because we are on the verge of another Chernobyl in Zaporizhia right now. Now, the Ukrainians, of course, have access to the power lines at Chernobyl, so they were able to repair that, right? No spikes in radiation, no problem with the pumps running. Everything at Chernobyl is fine today. That is not the case at Zaporizha. That is not the case. And I want to highlight what will happen if those pumps shut off. That uranium needs to be kept cool. When the temperature goes up, neutrons start firing. When those neutrons start firing, they start firing more neutrons. That raises the temperature. The more the temperature gets raised, the more neutrons start firing until finally we are in a critical chain reaction and we have a core meltdown. And that is what we are looking at. Now, when Chernobyl melted down, it is important to remember that as far away as Pennsylvania dairy cattle tested positive for cesium and strontium in the wake, radioactive particles, the result of the disaster at Chernobyl. This problem in Zaporizhia, this egregious, reckless nature of the Russian incompetence in managing this reactor, I don't know. That's a good question, Raven. I would assume it is because it's of that same period as Chernobyl. So in all likelihood, yeah, I believe it is. I'd have to look it up, though. I don't know the answer to that. That's what the Soviet Union built, so that's most likely. Now, the problems that we are having are not based on the type of reactor it is. The problems that we are having are based on the Russian incompetence and their failure to manage this. Or, much more insidious read is that they are doing it on purpose, that they intend to let that reactor melt down. Now, that is insanity of the worst sort. One cannot believe that they could be that stupid. When we look at the jet stream over Zaporizhia, 5 days out of the month, it heads due north right to Moscow. If that thing melts down on the wrong day, Moscow will be irradiated. That's reality. Somebody mentioned, isn't Putin worried about his summer palace in Sochi being irradiated? Putin's not worried about that, pal. Putin tore it down rather than let the Ukrainians shell it. A $2 billion palace. Putin tore it down rather than give the Ukrainians the satisfaction of hitting it with drones or missiles. I mean, that is the mentality of who we are dealing with right now. So yeah, that's not the concern. So we're going to continue to watch the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant because it is a real threat, not merely to the Ukrainians, not merely to the Russians, but to the entire world. Now, somebody mentioned Trump has approved U.S. intelligence sharing for deep strikes into Russia. This is according to reporting in the Wall Street Journal. And this is a good way, or this is a good move on the part of America. It certainly makes me feel better about being an American, seeing this kind of intelligence sharing. There is discussion, Norbert, of Tomahawks and JASSMs being sold to Ukraine. Now, I say it like that because it's not military aid coming from the United States, and I think that that's a sin. I want my tax dollars to go to sending weapons to Ukraine. That's what I want. And it kills me that we're living in this Trump-induced transactional world where what have you done for me lately? It has replaced e pluribus unum as the motto of the United States. It's obscene in my mind. And what have you done for me lately from Mr. Trump means that the Europeans are free to buy weapons for Ukraine. It could be as much to the tune of $100 billion in weapons sales to Ukraine, paid for by the Europeans or floated by loans from the Russian assets, the frozen Russian assets. Putin is pissed about the frozen Russian assets being used to fund Ukraine. He's pissed. He is threatening to seize Western assets in Russia. The only problem is he did that already. He did it back in 2023. Whatever assets there were of the federal government of the United States or European governments, that's already been seized. There's nothing left to seize except for the private enterprises that failed to exit Russia. And I want to highlight that since the start of the full-scale invasion, Russia has nationalized, seized the assets to the tune of $29 billion, billion with a B, US, over the last 3 years. 13 billion of it just in this year alone in 2025. 13 billion of it in this year alone. Almost half. So this notion that Russia is going to punish us by seizing our assets is ludicrous. It's just the ludicrous rantings of a person who apparently has no idea how the world works and no idea of what he did 2 years ago. You know, I was watching an interview with Mark Galeotti today, and if you're interested in Ukraine, if you're ever on YouTube and you see an interview with Mark Galeotti, who's an academic, a specialist in Russia, an author of many books on Russia, a recognized expert in Russian history and geopolitics. If you're ever scrolling through YouTube and you see Mark Galeotti interviews, I recommend you give it a go because the guy has real insight into what's happening. And his analysis of Putin's undertaking of the full-scale invasion is that Putin did not understand the world he was living in. Galeotti, it's G-A-L-L, I think it's 2 L's, G-A-L-L-E-T-T-I. G-A-L-L-E-T-T-I, Galeotti. There's an O in there too, O-T-T-I, Galeotti. He was saying that the reason that Putin invaded in the first place is that he did not understand the Ukrainians' willingness to defend themselves. He did not understand the political environment in the West and how the West would respond to a full-scale war in Europe. He did not understand the tools of statecraft, nor the limits on military power. In other words, when Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine, he was a person living under a misapprehension of how the world worked. And when I look at Donald Trump, I think that that's exactly what Donald Trump's problem is. He does not understand how the world works. He does not understand the limits on military power. He does not understand much of anything. But the fact that he has shut the government down should not surprise anybody, because that is his whole jam, is murdering the U.S. federal system of government, destroying our power and influence in the world, and taking all power at the federal level onto himself, as he is constantly doing through his series of illegal executive orders, tomfoolery, and deployment of goons to American streets. I was very disappointed today that the commander of the National Guard for Oregon got on the TV and said the words, "Listen, guys, we're just coming here to help. Remember, we're your friendly neighborhood National Guard, right? It's just us." Bullshit. Bullshit. The order to deploy you is an illegal order. It is time for U.S. National Guardsmen to stop obeying illegal orders. if you obey these orders and you go onto an American street and you beat American citizens for exercising their constitutionally protected rights. You are a thug and a member of a fascist arm of an increasingly fascist government. You are a tool of a tyrant. And I have no sympathy for them. None. None of them should follow these orders. They should all stand down and conscientiously object to their illegal deployment on the streets of American cities against the wishes of the governors and the mayors of those cities. You're not kidding, Pingu. I'm very happy, Raven, to see that judges and governors in the U.S. are saying that ICE agents, masked ICE agents, are a problem, are illegal, that we have never tolerated, in the words of a judge, I forget the judge's name, but in the words of a judge who just heard a case about ICE, he said the words, "The United States has never tolerated a masked secret police, and we should not do it today." Yeah, Seawolf, I'm deeply sympathetic to that, I'll tell you, pal. Now, out in the Lerman direction, we saw the Ukrainians take out 3 tanks. Now, I only mention this because taking out tanks is so rare these days. If we look at the percentage of tanks and armored vehicles that are being lost by the Russians as a percentage of all vehicle losses, it's down to 4%. For every 100 vehicles they destroy, only 4 of them are tanks or armored vehicles. The rest are civilian cars and trucks and soft targets. Boom. And this is compared in 2024, 10% of vehicle losses were armored or tanks. In 2023, it was 20% of all vehicle losses were armored or tanks. They don't have the tanks left. They don't have them left to use and lose in battle. As my understanding, Tycho, is that most of the mules, horses, and donkeys, and at least 1 camel, have mostly been eaten on the front line because protein, fresh meat is so scarce that the Russians have mostly eaten those animals. Yeah, it's a desperate situation. It's a desperate situation. Now get this. On the subject of the desperation, right? We know that they're using motorcycles. Well, motorcycle losses aren't tracked as part of vehicle losses. So if you add in all the motorcycles, the armored losses drop to just 1% of vehicle losses. The Russians are out of tanks. The Russians are out of armored personnel carriers. They have squandered the vast inheritance of the Soviet army in this foolish, pointless, doomed to failure campaign in Ukraine. I'll tell you guys, especially the Patreon folks, because the Patreon folks are my bread and butter, right? Without the Patreon folks, I would have to pack it up and go home and get a real job. But thanks to you guys and people like Norbert who sponsor lives. And if anybody wants to sponsor a live, Norbert's sponsoring Monday. All next week is open. I could really use the help. It is such a privilege to be here. I really want to stress to everybody how grateful I am to all of you that tune in every night and that talk to me and send me articles and send me videos and stuff like that. And don't turn away. That's the thing. It is so easy. In Bulgaria last week, if I wasn't looking for news about the war, nobody was talking about it. It wasn't on any screen I saw. It wasn't part of any discussion that I had. If I didn't initiate it. It is so easy when you're in a country at peace to turn away from what's happening in the world And I commend every single one of you who tunes into this channel, right? Whose number two goal, our number two goal here, is to keep Ukraine in the forefront of everybody's mind. Because it is the most important thing happening on earth today. And the needle is moving. Thank you, Akron. The needle is moving. I want to highlight that France, as we know, seized one of those Russian Shadow Fleet tankers that we believe was involved in sending drones that closed Copenhagen airport. Bulgaria is close to the action. Bulgaria is close to the action. Bulgaria is a Slavic country. Bulgaria is a former Warsaw Pact member. You would think, but no. Life in Sofia these days is great. People are having a good time. The streets are full. The restaurants, shops, and nightclubs are open 24 hours a day. The euro is coming in January. Nobody is thinking about war in Europe if they can avoid it. And it's easy to close your eyes to it. It's so easy. So, Bjorn, like you, right? Our buddy Bjorn down there from Sweden, that fucking guy is in this live every single night. He does not turn away. Julia, if you're a Ukrainian, I really appreciate that. It's always deeply meaningful for me to hear nice things from Ukrainians. So thank you. Okay. Now look, the French are on it. French are on it, baby. You can say what you want about the French, right? Like, you never go to Paris anytime except August because that's when all the Parisians are gone, right? Fair enough. But you got to give the French credit for the help that they have given Ukraine through this thing. They were some of the first ones to send long-range missiles. And now they are the first ones to arrest a captain and first officer of a Russian Shadow Fleet vessel. Both the captain and first officer of the Pushpa have been taken into custody in France. Now, right now, they have been taken into custody on kind of like paperwork bullshit. The charges against them are false documentation, flying under a flag for a country that they are not actually associated with. It's not Russian flagged. It's currently flagged, I want to say Benin or maybe Djibouti. I was reading the history of this vessel. It's been reflagged 3 times in the last 9 months. And so it's just a flag of convenience. It's not genuinely flagged for the country of its origin, which is Russia. And that's why they're in violation of international law and have been taken into custody. They are also being charged with failure to follow orders. So you're in somebody's territorial waters, their Navy says pull the fuck over, you don't pull over, it's a little bit like resisting arrest, I guess. So that's good news. Now this ship is, you can be sure there's no insurance, Seawolf. That'll be another charge yet. So, what was I going to say? This vessel, there are 3 vessels that could have been used to launch the drones that closed the Copenhagen airport. This is one of them. And of course, what we're hoping is that an investigation of the ship will provide evidence that it was used in that incursion into Danish airspace last Thursday. Now, what I didn't appreciate was that just a day later, or 2 days later, after that incursion into Danish airspace, Copenhagen Airport was where all the leaders of the EU were coming for an EU leader-level summit, the first one that's happened since June. So I don't think the choice of Copenhagen anymore was an accident or a coincidence. Putin was sending a message to EU leaders that he can target Copenhagen if he wants. That's what he was doing. Now, out of that meeting, we did get some great quotes. So, first of all, there's 4 billion euros coming to Ukraine to finance the government and the war effort from frozen Russian assets. Additionally, Ursula von der Leyen said that they would provide 2.2 billion for drone production in Ukraine. Zelensky said that Ukrainian experience is the most relevant in the EU today, and our expertise, our specialists, and technology can become key elements of the drone wall. There is talk today, and at this meeting, there was a great deal of talk about establishing a drone wall to protect Europe. Not just the eastern flank, not just Operation Eastern Sentry, but a drone wall around all of Europe. Now, this is a significant undertaking, and I think that Boris Pistorius, the German defense minister, who expressed some skepticism about this, was not wrong to express some skepticism. He said, I very much appreciate the idea of a drone wall, but we should manage expectations. This is not a concept that can be implemented in 3 or 4 years. And unfortunately, I do have to say, I think he's right. I do think he's right. Now, Mark Rutte is a little more positive, and he said that the U.S. has opened the floodgates of weapons to Ukraine again. Yes, I'll take that. And commented on the drone wall initiative, saying it was an excellent idea, timely and necessary. And I couldn't agree more. I do think that it is important to point out that for almost 4 years now, the Ukrainians have been taking it on the chin every night. True, the Russians have not exerted air superiority over Ukraine, but the Ukrainians have been slow to ramp up their own air superiority. We've seen Kyiv ask Western partners over and over and over again for more air defense and to help close the skies over Ukraine. And so far, nobody has lifted a finger. Nobody will even shoot down, until the Poles did it 2 weeks ago, almost 3 weeks now. Nobody would even shoot down a Russian drone that entered their airspace. Those days do appear to be coming to an end. But I want to highlight that when those Russian drones entered Polish airspace, en masse, clearly intentionally, the Ukrainians, who have gotten no help with closing their airspace, immediately sent specialists to Poland to share their experience, their strength, their hope, their technology with the Poles to help close Polish airspace to the Russian menace. And that speaks volumes of the kind of ally that the Ukrainians make. And NATO and the EU would be lucky to have them, in my opinion. The rest of us, the rest of the Western world, needs to wake up to the threat of Russian hybrid warfare and the corrupting, corrosive influence of Russian money in our politics. The Romanians and the Moldovans have stood up against election interference much better than my country has. You think we'd have Donald Trump without Russian money poisoning our political discourse? I don't. I don't think it for 1 second. Nathan Gill, who's a former MP in Great Britain, in the UK, has pled guilty to taking Russian bribes to promote pro-Russian policies and talking points in the British government. My great fear, now this is clearly something that we can all do. Every Western country can hunt down the people on the take, like Georgescu in Romania, like the AfD in Germany, like Le Pen and her people in France, and very much so the Republican Party and the people around Donald Trump in the United States, particularly Eldridge Colby, who is the Deputy Secretary of Defense and is basically the power behind Keg's breath, who's actually running the DOD these days. That's the guy who's running it. And he is a traitor with a Russian wife who's tied to Putin and the Russian oligarchs. And he's the guy running the American Department of Defense. It is no wonder that they want to use the military to go to war against the American people, because it's being run by Russian puppets. Make no mistake. That's who's in charge in the United States. Thanks, Tycho. Guys, everybody was so generous with Bulgaria. I didn't have to worry about anything on the Bulgaria trip. And like I said, the rent will be paid tomorrow. I have the cash for the rent. I just don't have any more money. Bulgaria was more expensive than Ukraine, definitely. Still very reasonable. But I did notice the kind of folks that were at this conference tended to be kind of privileged people. The places we went to eat each night were not McDonald's or Burger King or pizza places. Not by any stretch of the imagination. Although the food, I could go on about the food for a long time because it was fucking delicious. We saw the Sukhademinya or something. I'm sorry about my Russian, guys. I have a real hard time with some of these names. But this is in Rostov. It's an oil pumping station that I believe is connected to the Caspian Consortium pipeline that brings oil from Russia's far Siberian oil fields and Kazakhstan to the Black Sea for export. Well, it's on fire, which means it's not pumping oil. NASA's firm's data shows a large fire in multiple areas of the pumping station. So we'll have to wait for a damage assessment on that. But that's another brick in the wall. In Volgograd, Gazprom gas stations have limited supplies. There's no 92A apparently anywhere to be found in Volgograd. Yarsneft and Volgoneft, two smaller independent gas station groups, they're all shut down. They're just all shut down because they have no gas. And there's two refineries in Volgograd that provide local supply. Now they've both been hit. One is offline. The other one, output is down, we think about 50%. And so these independent chains are really suffering unless you're Gazprom, unless you're, who's another big one? Lukoil. And you're buying in bulk from the main oil refineries. You're shit out of luck these days with refining capacity down 38%, according to RBC Russia. Out in Kaporvska? Out in Kaporvska Krai, which is way out in the Far East, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. People are limited to 2.6 gallons of gas every 3 days now. That's 10 liters. People are limited to 2.6 gallons of gas every 3 days now. That's 10 liters. You can only in the far eastern provinces. Increasingly, right? Like what happens when an empire dies, guys? It dies from its edges inward to the center. As resources become more strained, as there is less and less to go around, you can be sure that Moscow is going to recall those resources to itself. And the outlying to go around, you can be sure that Moscow is going to recall those resources to itself. And the outlying districts are going to see what we emergency airplane crashes, helicopter failures, trains just running off the rails, and not because of Ukrainian sabotage. Simply because the infrastructure isn't getting the support that it needs, the maintenance sabotage. Simply because the infrastructure isn't getting the support that it needs, the maintenance it needs. It's not getting what it needs. Raven says there are bread lines in Moscow. Not yet. Putin wanted the Soviet Union back. He's got it, baby. Gas now, bread lines tomorrow. Harvest is about to come in or is in the process of coming in, and it's not going to go well. We know that the wheat harvest is expected to be down 60% over last year. 60%. We could well see food lines and bread lines inside Russia this winter. Everybody's lagging. We're almost out of time, guys. I hate to restart it. We're almost out of time, guys. I hate to restart it. Try jumping out and jumping back in. Courtney Davis says it's okay. Renvox says it's okay. Good now. Good now. Look, we did have, the lights keep turning off and on here. We had hits against telecommunications infrastructure and energy. Lights keep turning off and on here. We had hits against telecommunications infrastructure and energy infrastructure here in Kyiv. I wasn't here at the time, but on Saturday. And it appears that the local authorities are having some trouble getting things squared away. Can Russia be receiving fuel from China? I don't believe, that's not how that works. China buys from Russia. China doesn't have the domestic production to share fuel with Russia, as I understand it. Russia's trying to buy from Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan and Belarus and Kyrgyzstan. But the problem is that Russia supplies Kyrgyzstan with all of the oil and with much of its refined oil products. Russia is barely 5% of its daily needs from their excess. And their excesses are failing because they're not getting the supplies from Russia to turn it in to refined oil products. That's a problem. Yeah, they'll take petrol from anybody, Colin, right now, if only you can get it to them. A Belarusian fuel train with 18 cars was just derailed and the fuel burned, likely because of partisan activity. Although, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't had anybody claim that attack. Not to the best of my knowledge. Okay, guys, we have about 12 minutes left. I want to thank Avi, who is the sponsor of tonight's live. There were so many people, let me do the whole list one last time. There were so many people that were so generous to make the Bulgaria trip possible. And I'm deeply appreciative. You will see the results on Saturday. If you tune in Saturday, thanks, Leo. If you tune in Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern European time, which is 5 p.m. London time Saturday, noon in New York, 9 in LA. The next Laughter is the Best Medicine show will be happening. And Act 2 will be all improv with the audience based on the things that I learned in Bulgaria. So you will see in real time me put to work what I think I learned, or at least make an effort at it. Join me. You might get to see me fail spectacularly, but we will have fun regardless. So I just want to go back real quick because the whole Bulgaria trip was a big deal to me, and it would not have been possible without the generous support of a whole bunch of people, including Pingu, our funny, happy dancing penguin, Avi, who was so generous, Michael Nally, John Halverson, Arna, our buddy Arn, Daryl Roberts, who's been around the channel forever. Really appreciate your support, Daryl. Guy Matthews, Sally, Scully, our friend Scully down in Australia, Cara, Lola Kay, and that's, and one person who wants to stay anonymous. One person that wants to stay anonymous. Okay, so I will leave them not anonymous. Oh, and look at a bunch of people. Nutmegger. Looks like Leo Ring, Nutmegger, Norbert Hackoff, all chipped in to make sure I have grocery money. Thank you, gentlemen. I really appreciate it. So I have grocery money now, and I have some sponsors for next week. Thank you, guys. Akron wants me to tell you a joke. Well, let's do this, Akron. Let's just finish the official live, right? If anybody has, so let me thank Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps group on the Book of Faces, all the Patreon supporters, without whom I could not continue. And of course, the moderator team, best moderators on the Tickety Talk. Big thanks to Pete, Jay, Travis, Maddie, and Feisty. So nice to see you hanging around again, Feisty. Thank you. And the best way to sponsor me is to join the Patreon. Please. Patreon, the link is in the description. That gives me predictability. It gives me stability. And it makes the Patreon guys make all the little things we do here, like these free comedy shows for the Ukrainians, possible. Other questions. Oh, and big thanks to Avi, who is the sponsor to tonight's live. Final questions, thoughts on the Russian full-scale invasion. I don't know if you can hear it, but the air raid siren is sounding right now. And I don't have access to my other apps. I can't tell you if where you have missiles inbound or drones inbound or what's inbound, but something is inbound. That's for sure. That's reality, Tycho. That's life in Ukraine, baby. Is the UK air defense working? I assume it is, Raven. I mean, the interception rate for the mobile air defense units around Ukraine is about 90%, which is huge. Just huge. Thanks for tuning in, Kiwi Annie. We don't know whether or not Dragonfire is deployed, Raven. I'd rather suspect it is, but I don't know that we have confirmation of that, nor do we know how many units are working. Raven's talking about a directed energy weapon that the Ukrainians developed based on a British weapon that we believe entered service, active combat service, maybe 4 months ago, 5 months ago, maybe. But we just don't know how many they have. And remember, the use of it is very limited. It's got a 2.5 kilometer range. So the drone has to be bearing down on you before it becomes an effective deterrent. It's UAVs, Sarah. That's normal. Thanks, Akron. Right now, all up MIA, KIA, WIA, and POW. According to the Ukrainians, the Russians have lost 1.1 million plus. Over 1.1 million. This war is rapidly approaching the same length as World War II, with just about as many casualties on the Russian side anyway. Well, no, I mean, the Russian casualties in World War II were off the scale, man. I mean, Stalin just threw everybody into the meat grinder. Any word on Kadyrov and his disciples lately, Peter? Not much. Kadyrov made a little noise about retiring, and that was enough to get him some more money from Moscow and keep him placated. And so he's still there. Soviet, not Russian. I don't know what that means. I don't know, Clive. The professionals, I mean, I wouldn't think so either, right? There's Jan. Hey, Jan. I wouldn't think that he could go on much longer either, but the professionals, like Lithuanian intelligence, says that Russia can keep this war up for another 3 years. I forget her first name, but there's an analyst at Chatham House? No, Atlantic fellow. Giganti is her last name, Giganti. Very sharp analyst. She went through the numbers and is convinced that Russia can keep it up for another 3 years too. I think in both of those cases, though, they take the Russian numbers as read. And I think the Russians are cooking the books. I think they're cooking the books bad. And I don't think they're going to survive the December reconciliation. When they do those budget reconciliations and all the losses they've been hiding come out, I think we're going to see bank failures, foreclosures, massive business failures and bankruptcies. Bankruptcies, I think, this year are up 170% over last year, and last year was high. Colin, to the best of my knowledge, nobody has seen Assad in public in months. Crimea will be liberated. That's my going away party, right? First of all, I'm not leaving this country until the Russians are gone. Second of all, I'm not leaving this country until we all have had a pig roast on a beach in Crimea. And you are all invited. Oh, Paul, you're talking about World War II numbers. That's a good point. Yeah, you're right. I did, Matthew. I meant to talk about that tonight, but I didn't have a chance to read about that story enough. So I didn't feel I was bringing enough detail to the reporting. And I intended to cover it tomorrow. But apparently, I think in Poland and Czechoslovakia, wasn't it? Some people have been arrested because they were planning a false flag operation inside Poland, explosives in cans of corn. And they were going to blame it on the Ukrainians. Titch agrees with Giganti. I assume that's who you're talking about. You're not alone, Titch. A lot of analysts in your court, baby. So we shall see. We're watching the dominoes now. Night, Norbert. Thanks again, pal. A fraction of Soviet casualties in World War II were Russian. A lot of Ukrainians, yep. So, Steve, one of the things that nobody's talking about, you mentioned rationing fuel ahead of winter. Well, as I understand it, these refineries have to undergo kind of recalibration so that they can produce winter quality fuel. Because, half of the equipment inside Russia is above the Arctic Circle or right on it. And so you need heavy, what they call T5 aviation fuel, and you need heavier weight fuels for cars, or a whole bunch of Russians aren't going anywhere between January and March. And with these refinery hits, how are they doing the retooling for the production of winter fuel on top of the repairs? That could cause a problem in supplies as well. Bradleys are still kicking ass on the front line. Yeah, man. When can we see the effects in Moscow? The effects in Moscow are already being felt. There is a shortage of 92A. Was it Lukoil? Shit. I can't remember if it was Lukoil or Gazprom closed a whole bunch of gas stations because they can't get the product to keep the tanks full. Putin is not well. Putin is definitely not well, Raven. That's an understatement. That pig roast is going to be a glorious day, Chrissy Locke. Start saving your pennies and plan on a trip. Right, everybody? Seriously, who knows, right? We could have a year, 2 years before that pig roast. So save your pennies and come on out. I would love to meet you in person. Cut you some meat off that pig. Come on, Van. Come on over for the pig roast, pal. We'll roast the Russians all night long. I don't expect any to be in attendance. Raven is a vegetarian. Well, dude, we need salads and crudité and desserts. Bring it all, baby. Bring it all. Why can't you get your passport? Get a you got time. Figure it out. What is the energy source for central heating in Russian apartments? It's a great question, Derek. A lot of people in the West don't understand that the Soviet systems used central heating, meaning that an entire town gets its heat from a single plant, which is still astonishing to me as an American, as a person who grew up and in 50 years never once lived in a house where we didn't have our own boiler and thermostat. You know, in a capitalist culture, if it's 80 degrees outside and I want to turn on the heat, I can. If it's 0 degrees outside and I want to turn on the air conditioning, I can, because it's my house. That is not the case here. It's 40 degrees outside, which is like, what, 4 Celsius? And I'm boiling a pot of water on the stove because it's so fucking cold in here, and we're still 2 weeks away from the heat getting turned on. So the energy source is thermal power plants. Now, those thermal power plants can have multiple fuel sources, as I understand it, Derek. However, it's worth pointing out that the Ukrainians are not targeting them because they are civilian infrastructure. It's the Russians who are targeting the thermal power plants in Ukraine. And it's the Russians who have destroyed 80% of the thermal power plants in Ukraine. The Ukrainian grandmothers would be freezing in their beds if it were not for the sheer grit, determination, and ingenuity of the Ukrainian people. Oh, Matthew, from your lips to God's ear. Van, I'm not kidding, man. I mean, like, think about it, right? So, think about this. All of us here have a real interest in the preservation of democracy for the next generation. All of us here stand in unison with the Ukrainian people in this hour of their need. Why wouldn't you, when it was over, take a trip to Ukraine, see the country. And if there happened to be a pig roast to go to on a beach in Crimea with the people that, you talk to for the years now of this war, why on earth wouldn't you want to go and have a beer or a soda or whatever and get a little sun and sand and maybe play some volleyball and enjoy the victory? So I'm dead serious, and I do hope some of you come. Renvox, those orange berries that Dragon brought in were something that I've been interested in since I got here because they're completely unknown to me. They are a wild berry, endemic and native to this region, and they go by the English name of sea buckthorn. The seed oil has some uses, and the berries themselves are a tart, I don't want to say citrusy, but rather what I would actually say is astringent. They have an astringent quality to them. There's very little flesh on the berry. There are large spikes on the twigs, the branches, and I confess I didn't find a good use for them. So maybe he'll bring some more and I'll have a chance to experiment with them some more. Yeah, no, very interesting, but you can understand why they haven't seen broader domestication. That's for sure. Okay. I apologize. I forget who I promised this joke to, but I'll tell a joke. Akron. It was Akron. Akron, I have a twist on an old favorite. Is everybody ready? And just bear with me. Don't give up on me till the end, because you're going to recognize the beginning of this joke. I've stolen it from Ronald Reagan. In Red Square one day, Designology, you're just here for the jokes, pal. In Red Square one day, two people are talking, an American and a Russian. And the American says, my country is so much better than your country because in my country, I can walk right into Donald Trump's office, I can pound on the desk, and I can say, Mr. President, you are doing a terrible job. You are the worst president in American history. And the Russian says, it's the same here. I can go to Kremlin. I can go to Putin's office. I can bang on his desk. And I can say, Donald Trump is worst president in American history. Suddenly, two guys come out of the crowd and arrest the Russian. The American is flabbergasted. He can't understand why the Russian's been arrested. And he says to the two FSB officers, why are you arresting this man? And the FSB officer says, everyone knows Donald Trump is best president in Russian history. Richard Prexis grows some of those. Nice. It could have been that they were picked too early or too late. I don't know the answer to that. So that's my take, Akron, on a classic Reagan joke updated for the current world. A world where, unbelievably, the U.S. federal system of government has been subverted by a malign foreign agent, a creature of the Kremlin in the person of Donald Trump. That's the world we're living in. Okay. So thanks, everybody. I still have a couple spots open for next week if anybody can sponsor a live. Always appreciated. Hey, Arna, you slid in here in the DMs late. How you doing, pal? Alan, your question just goes to the hypocrisy of the entire Russian mindset. I mean, it's a joke. Tomahawks for all. Well, Renvox, you're one of my supporters. You're here all the time. And that's deeply meaningful to me. Whether you're on the Patreon or not, it doesn't matter. You're invited to the pig roast. Right, Derek? Everybody's invited to the pig roast. Save your pennies. Plan a post-war trip to Ukraine. Plan to come to my pig roast. That includes you, Nicola. All right, kids. That's it for me. I'll see everybody tomorrow night. Thanks so much. Make it a great day.